He glanced at her with the kind of arrogance only money could buy. The restaurant was packed that evening. Gold chandeliers glinting off polished marble floors. Laughter of the wealthy mixing with the faint melody of a live violin. But amid that glittering chaos stood her. A young waitress whose apron was slightly wrinkled, but whose eyes carried quiet dignity. She balanced a tray of champagne glasses, weaving through the tables like she'd done this 1,000 times. And then the insult came. Softly spoken, hidden behind a smirk, but cutting deep. Os povera ragazza, non sa nemmeno stare in piedi bin. Poor girl, she can't even stand properly. He didn't know she understood every word. What happened next would silence the billionaire and leave the entire restaurant frozen in disbelief. The story begins in the heart of Milan, where wealth and status defined a person's worth. Sofia Romano had learned to smile through humiliation. Every night at the luxurious Ristorante La Luna, she served the elite, the CEOs, the models, the heirs who looked down on her as if her worth ended with her paycheck. But what none of them knew was that Sofia once belonged to this world. She had grown up in comfort until her father's company collapsed after a betrayal from his own business partner, a man named Alessandro Moretti. That betrayal had cost them everything. Now, Sofia worked long shifts to pay for her mother's medical bills, her hands raw from washing dishes, her dreams buried under exhaustion. That night, fate pulled her back into the same circle that had ruined her family. Alessandro Moretti, Italy's youngest billionaire, was hosting a dinner to celebrate another business acquisition. He sat at his private table surrounded by executives, laughing in that cold, confident way that people do when they've never had to struggle. When Sofia approached with the wine, Alessandro barely looked up. But when she accidentally spilled a few drops onto the tablecloth, he sneered, muttering to his colleagues in Italian that she was probably too stupid to do anything else with her life. The words stabbed through her, not just because of their cruelty, but because of who they came from, the man responsible for her father's downfall. Her hand trembled slightly as she steadied the bottle, her eyes lowering out of habit. But deep inside, a storm was rising. He laughed again, throwing another careless comment in Italian. This time, a cruel joke about her looks, assuming she couldn't understand. The men around him chuckled. Sofia took a slow breath, then looked him straight in the eyes. And in perfect, fluent Italian, she replied, La vera stupidità e giudicare il valor di qualcuno dal lavoro che fa. Anche I ricci dimenticano che la vita può cambiare in un solo giorno. Och, the true stupidity is judging someone's worth by the job they do. Even the rich forget that life can change in a single day. The table fell silent. Alessandro's smirk vanished, his face tightening as her words echoed through the dining hall. A few nearby guests turned to look curious. Sofia didn't waver. She stood tall, tray in hand, her voice steady but filled with quiet fire. For the first time, Alessandro couldn't find a clever retort. She simply turned, finished serving the next table, and walked away, leaving him staring after her shaken. That night, her courage became the talk of the staff. Some whispered that she'd get fired, others admired her bravery. But something unexpected happened the next day. When Sofia arrived at work, the manager called her into the office. Her heart raced. She was sure she'd be dismissed. Instead, he handed her an envelope. Someone left this for you, he said. Inside was a note written on expensive stationery. Sever, you speak Italian beautifully. Let's talk. A. Moretti. She wanted to tear it apart. But curiosity, mixed with the strange satisfaction of having stood up to him, made her pause. That evening after her shift, she went to the rooftop terrace, where Alessandro had asked to meet. The city lights shimmered around them, and for once, he didn't wear that smug smile. I owe you an apology, he began. What I said last night was unforgivable. Sophia folded her arms. You meant it, though? He hesitated. Yes, I did. Because I didn't know who you were. He then told her he recognized her face later that night, when it finally hit him. She was the daughter of Marco Romano, the man he'd ruined years ago. Regret flickered across his expression. Your father was a good man. What happened wasn't fair, he admitted. I was young, reckless, and blinded by ambition. Sophia's voice cracked as she said, You destroyed our lives. My mother's been sick ever since. I had to quit school to pay for her treatment. He lowered his head. I can't undo the past. But I want to make it right. She didn't believe him. Not yet. But over the next weeks, Alessandro kept returning to the restaurant, never demanding, never arrogant. Instead, he sat quietly, sometimes leaving generous tips, sometimes just watching her with a look that wasn't pity, but respect. Eventually, he offered her a position, not as a waitress, but as a translator for his international clients. She hesitated but accepted, determined to use the opportunity, not forgiveness, as power. Working beside him changed things. She saw a side of Alessandro the world didn't know, a man burdened by guilt, trying to rebuild something real. And he saw in her the strength he lacked, the courage to start over. Their bond grew quietly, built on honesty rather than money. One evening, while reviewing contracts, he looked at her and said softly, You were right that night. Life can change in a single day. You changed mine. Sophia smiled faintly. Then make it mean something. The months later, Alessandro set up a scholarship in her father's name, funding education for young Italians who'd lost everything to corruption. Sophia continued her studies, her mother's health improving, her own spirit shining brighter than ever. At the grand reopening of La Luna, where it all began, Alessandro stood to give a toast. A lesson I learned from a brave young woman, he said to the crowd. Respect has no price tag. And language, whether spoken or through kindness, is what truly connects us. Sophia watched from across the room, her heart full, not because of wealth or forgiveness, but because she had found her voice and made even the most powerful man listen. And as she turned to leave that night, someone whispered in awe, That's her, the waitress who silenced the billionaire. She smiled to herself, the sound of her footsteps blending into the music, her head held high, proof that dignity speaks louder than any insult ever could.